don't think everybody heard. I don't mean, okay. Got some people coming in. Tavares is coming in. Okay, one of our key speakers, we got to let him in. So we in there. Okay, I'm gonna start over. So I want to first say thank you all for joining in to Thrive Corporation. This is our third annual event. This is our first virtual event, but this series is focused on. Hey, how you doing, Tavares? This series is focused on young adults summit, and we're going to talk about a few things. So we're going to go ahead and open up in prayer, and we're going to have Mr. Gary Page open up in prayer.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, y'all. I doing that right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pray real quick. Father, I thank you for this summit, Lord. I thank you for the influence we'll have. God, I just pray that something will be said today, Lord, that will encourage our hearts, God. Most of all, something that will change your life. I thank you for the panelists that are coming. Father, I just pray that you will give them what to say and how to say it, God. And then I just pray that, Lord, you will get the glory out of the summit, Lord. I pray that you will even touch Christina, God, as she continues to do it, Lord. Give her new ideas, Lord. Continue to send the resources and the help that she needs, God, for it to continue to thrive. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Amen. So I am not going to host this. We're going to have IKEA. So I'm going to introduce. Thank you so much, Mr. Cameron, for that powerful prayer. You know, that's our prophet, y'all, back in the day.
Oh my gosh.
He's still a prophet. Let me tell you.
Here you go. Here you go.
Preach, his shout. Okay.
All right, sir.
But that's going to be on another summit. I got to invite him to another one. But I am going to go ahead and invite and introduce this phenomenal young woman. Her name is IKEA. She's a motivational speaker, educator, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to her hand. She has so much great things. I'm going to let her introduce herself and give a little bit background. But she's going to go ahead and take over. IKEA.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Like she said, my name is IKEA Norris. I am an educator. I founded a nonprofit organization in the works, Parenting with Power. And it really stemmed from my personal journey as a young parent. And so pretty much what my lifelong motivation and inspiration has been to inspire and to empower other parents, especially those who are teen parents, and especially single parents as well, because that was my personal journey. And so that's what I do. If you want to learn more, you can definitely follow me on social media, Parenting with Power, on Instagram and Facebook, as well as my personal information, which I will share later. But we are going to get into this powerful discussion today. We'll be discussing 3 hot topics: mental health, core identity, and self-love. Self-love is definitely my favorite, so I'm definitely going to be looking forward to sharing in that discussion. But first, without further ado, we will get started with our first speaker, Mr. 𝗬𝗂𝗂𝗂, who will be leading our discussion on mental health awareness. So 𝗬𝗂𝗂𝗂, welcome.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. Thank you. Today, I want to talk about just a little bit about mental health, because during the times that we are going through, it's very important to understand the emotional intelligence. You want to understand physical, you want to understand just spiritual, anything that you think that can bring you to be one, that means to be whole, is a great thing. So I want to share my website with you guys. I think I can hit the share tab if I'm not mistaken. Actually, you can't. But so if you go to 𝗏𝑑mentalities.org, you don't have to do it now. But if you go to 𝗏𝑑mentalities.org, you will be able to see my mental health blog. And it's basically talking about a variety of things. And I'll pull up a couple topics what I talk about. And it's really great to understand the fundamental of mental health. And so the reason why I started this mental health blog is because after I left grad school, I was very depressed. And it was because of the expectations that the life or the society gives us, based off of social media or based off of paper that is a degree that you work so hard for, and you're thinking everything's going to come across so easy as soon as you graduate, but that's just not true. And I feel like once I understood that hard work is also outside of school, because we're always built through school systems, and I had to understand that life also has its own system. And so once I understood that, I created that blog for people to understand that just because you got the degree doesn't mean that it stops there. And I had to understand the prospect of just working and building your resume and going out to peers and lunches and also doing things that don't benefit you right away. I feel like that's a lot of the problems we have today is just understanding that the work that you're doing is not going to be seen tomorrow. It's going to be seen next year. It's going to be seen in 2 years and 3 years. And so that process was me just understanding the fact that I am going to do work, but it's also not going to be seen right away. It's just like going to the gym the first week. It's about going the second week, the third week, and the fourth week. Because after the first week, you can be like, man, I'm sore. And you're going to be like, I don't want to go no more. Like, let me just go eat the burger. And it's like, man, I ain't seen no abs. But if you go a month and 2 months and 3 months, it's just like with your mental. If you say, hey, I'm kind of depressed right now, so I'm gonna stay in my room. Well, you know, that can like lead you down a dark path. But if you go outside for a walk, now you're going for a jog, now you're gonna ride a bike, and now you're gonna go for a job interview. So it's just realizing that your physical aligns with your mental. And the biggest thing that I can say today is just realizing that your mental health and your physical health is just as important. And I think that we all learned about drinking milk when we was younger and staying active, but none of us really learned the importance of talking about the emotional intelligence. And so that's where I want to take us now is just realizing that it's okay to say I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm mad, and then having someone to talk to. And I'm really big on therapists, but I won't preach that today because everybody has their own outlet. But for me, I have a therapist, and with my therapist, it's about being honest. Because a lot of times when you go to therapy, people feel like they're just going to get questioned to death or they want to go back to your childhood, which is very important, but it's more likely that they want to understand the root of you. And that's why a lot of times they go to your childhood, because if you were neglected or your voice didn't matter as a kid, a lot of times you hold that in your relationships and with your friendships and all that stuff. So it's really important to understand that you need to speak for yourself, like your intelligent self, your beautiful body, your mind has its own thoughts. And if somebody is making you feel like your thoughts and your emotional intelligence don't matter, then it's not the situation you need to be in. And I think that was the biggest thing that I learned during that time. It's because I went to school for 4 years for my undergrad, and I got a communications degree, and then I got an IT degree for my master's. And then when I got out, I felt like, oh, the world is mine, and I could do anything. But that was beat down by corporations. That was beat down by private corporations, the state. And I was just like, so my degree doesn't matter. You're going to pay me like the same as everybody else. And they said yes. And at that moment, I felt like I wasn't special, that I did all this for no reason. And so I had to go back to just being one and realizing that everything is not about money. Everything is not about success in a career path. Sometimes you have to take a step back and say, hey, am I whole? Am I even ready for that job? And was I even the best candidate for that job? Like, did I even have the necessary resume tactics, or did I even meet the right people for this job? Because not everything's on the paper. Sometimes you got to know people. And so I just took that time out of grad school to just realize that I needed to become whole as a person. And a lot of times when you take a step back, hindsight is always 20/20. So you have to realize, wow, I'm actually not glad I went through the depression, but it just changed my life to a different way that I did not expect it to go through. And the major points that I would stress that I went through that I feel like everybody should just realize in their life is emotional intelligence, which is, if people don't know what that means, I keep saying it. It's about knowing how to communicate with your emotions effectively to people around you. And so that means that, okay, today I'm going to go in this job today and I'm going to do my best. I'm not feeling the best, but I'm going to be emotionally intelligent enough to ask people for a second if I go in and they want to bum rush with me questions. They're saying, hey, can I have a second? Instead of being standoffish or instead of being kind of catching an attitude with them. It's being intelligent enough to say, hey, I need a moment. And a lot of people don't do that. They just keep going and adding stuff to their back and adding stuff to their back. And next thing you know, you blow up. And so it is very important to understand that, because that is how you create problems in your life and situations and obstacles. because you end up not confronting the problem. And so that is the number one thing I would say as an adult, is to confront your problems up front with yourself. And then once you do that, you're aware of everybody around you, and you can also ask them, hey, I need a second here, or could you help me with this? Or could you please look after my work today, because I'm really forgetful today. I don't know what's going on. And some reason we always want to be Superman. We always want to just put the cape on and say, no, I can do it myself, and I can do this and I can do that. But all that does is just create so much pressure. And don't let you have 2 kids and a dog and a husband. And once you start adding all that up, it's just, that's when your life really starts going off the rails there. And so I just really am happy that Christina invited me here to the platform, because I think that everybody has the potential to just be emotionally intelligent. And that's the biggest thing I want to share.
Wow. Wow, that was powerful. There's so many nuggets that I was writing down as you were speaking. First off, it is so important. And I think that, like you said, physical and mental health, it's not that, you know, physical is more important, but to be honest, I would think that your mental health got to be first, because it's your mind that controls your life, your every decision. It's the brain that tells the body what to do and things like that. So it's like mental health should definitely be a priority.
Definitely.
You know? And then another thing that you had said is, you know, with the emotional intelligence and knowing how to communicate your emotions, basically. You know, again, that's something that you're not taught in school.
No, not at all.
You know, and unless you have parents who are emotionally, you know, intelligent, or have that information and have that insight and understanding with their own emotions, then a child can be trained, you know, to do the same for themselves. But if not, you know, I don't know about anybody else, but I grew up in a very heated, emotional type of environment where it's like parents yell when they're, you know, feeling some type of way. And, you know, and that was kind of the form of communication. So like you said, you grow up, and as an adult, now that's the only expression of your emotions that you have. So I think that, like you said, emotional intelligence is definitely key. Knowing how to express your emotions in a way that is healthy and is beneficial to you, and as well to the others who you're expressing it to. You know?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people have to understand that we were taught sometimes the incorrect way. And it's okay to take some things from your parents, like, oh, my parents said, don't spare the rod to their kid. I understand that. But you have to understand that not every time you need to whoop your kids. Sometimes they need to know what they did wrong, because when they grow up, they can grow up doing the same thing to their kids. And that grows up with the mind state of saying, you know what, anything that somebody has control over me, it's right. And that's just not wrong. We're seeing that every day with leaders everywhere that are corrupt. Like, not everybody in leadership is right. And we have to understand that sometimes we just need to communicate with our kids and understand why they're upset, and then we can correct their behavior.
Absolutely. You know, and then, you know, for any of the young people who are on participating in this discussion, know that, you know, regardless of the way that you were brought up, you know, in your family and things like that, as an adult, you now have a choice to change the narrative. So you no longer have to operate, you know, in a certain way in which, you know, if it was, like I said, for myself, if it was an environment where people were yelling all the time, and, you know, your voice didn't matter. You were told to sit down, be quiet, and do as I say, whatever. But as an adult, you no longer have to live by that and operate in that way. You can make a choice now to change your story and to, you know, use your voice. This is what this summit is all about. Your voice matters, you know? And so begin to understand and ask those questions to yourself, you know, of the whys, you know, and then begin to learn how to express your emotions, express your thoughts in a way where, you know, it's, you know, unapologetic, to be honest. Because for myself, walking around with that stuff on your chest and not speaking of it, not getting it out, having those thoughts and not getting it out, that's what I believe causes a lot of people anxiety, depression, all those other mental health, you know, issues, you know. So.
And lastly, I wanted to say that anxiety and depression are real. Growing up, I was not taught that. It was just a tough time. Everything was a tough time. You get over it. Like, I was always taught that God would not put nothing on you that you can't overcome, which is very true. but you have to understand that you can get through it with the help he's provided you on earth, which is therapists and doctors and family and friends, and you don't have to do it yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we are going to take a brief moment to answer some questions. So if you guys have any questions for 𝗬𝗂, specifically about mental health and his journey, and any suggestions, tips, whatever, any feedback that you have, now is the time to dive in and ask and share. So you can go on and unmute yourselves, or you can put it on in the chat.
I had a question, T. Like, even with today's events, I know sometimes people in our community, the Black community, growing up, we weren't really taught like about our mental health. We're just so used to like kind of like being strong and writing it out. So like, what type of advice do you have for people who feel like, oh, I can just, you know, write it out, and just for people in our community who kind of disregard our mental health at times?
I would definitely say that the biggest thing to understand when you want help is to feel like it's natural to need help. Like, we don't come into the world without help. So we have to understand that somebody got us here. And the biggest point is like, you wouldn't be here without them. And so when you want to do things yourself, you have to understand that, where has that gotten you? So you have to look back and be like, all right, so when I rush this by myself, when I do this by myself, that didn't really get me to a good place. And then when I ask for help, yes, sometimes asking for help is vulnerable, but it's vulnerable because you're letting someone in your space. You're letting your heart open. You're making people trust you. You're getting their trust. So it's a beautiful thing, but you're protective of it. And it's important to know that being vulnerable is okay. So I would just say, like, asking for help can lead to success, because you can meet people in different leaderships. You can meet people in different groups. And then it can just expand your life just so much bigger and better.
I have a question, kind of like piggybacking off of what Joel asked. Basically, like, not just, more so like when to know when I should ask for help, and when to know when it's something that you can get through by yourself. You know, like, not to like dramatize every situation to make it seem like something that you need help with, like just the balance.
Yes. I would say the balance that's a great question, because you don't always want to be needy and get help for every situation. But I would definitely say if something's stressing you out, that's a sign. So if you're stressed about something like a topic or a homework assignment or a relationship, that's a big sign that like you probably should ask for help. And also, leading out of that question, if you're in a situation with a person or a work job that you feel that doesn't feel right somewhere in you, that's a sign too. Like, if you were like, I can't really talk to this person because it's dealing with this person, that's a huge sign.
Good questions.
Hey, I have a question too. Yeah. Hey, my name is Charlotte. I had a question regarding, some people are very introverted, and it's really hard for them to open up to other people. What would you say? What advice would you give to those introverted people who have a really hard time sharing their emotions? Because sometimes that first step is just a barrier in itself.
I would say that vocal isn't the only way you can share. I would say start a blog or a journal and start that way, because then people can just read your thoughts and then share it through comments or something like that. So I think that some people think that most of the time help means like, oh, I gotta go to this person and then talk, and go in this space and talk, and I don't just trust it. Try writing. Just try writing, and I think that might help. Or try a podcast, you know, like, it's different avenues you can do.
Absolutely. And if I can add anything, I was gonna say, I remember some years ago, because I had a rocky relationship with my father, and I was instructed by an elder to write him a letter. And so I would say, you know, even to her question, you know, if it's a personal thing with someone that you want to express something, write a letter.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, let's move on along. We are going to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Glenn Fisher, and he is also better identified by a name that I will allow him to pronounce because it has power behind it, and I do not want to take away from that. And he is going to lead our discussion on core identity. So welcome, Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And Christina, thank you for inviting to this discussion. I feel privileged again, just for being thought of to come and make a contribution to this. I'm going to start by saying I am a man of many names. And my names are actually tied to the topic because they all are part of my identity. And similar to stories in the Bible, when you got Jacob, whose name eventually becomes Israel, that is tied to his identity, tied to his purpose, tied to his contribution to the world. And so my names are the same. I was born Glenn Fisher. That's the name my mother and my father named me. I was named after my father's military best friend. And his military best friend named his first son after him. So that was like a pact they made. So that's the story behind the name Glenn. I was a student at North Carolina Central University. That's where I graduated from back in 2001. I initially went to Livingstone College for a couple of years, dropped out. That was right out of high school, came back home to Charlotte, found myself just working at the airport and said, look, I got to get back to school. And that's when I transferred to Central. Going to Central is a huge part of who I am today, because that is where my journey of self-discovery began. That was the time I even thought about the idea of who am I, my identity. And for African Americans, identity has been a very sensitive topic in our community for a little more than 100 years now. I would say the very first time historically, we as a collective and just the conversation was probably around 1912 to 1917 with organizers in those days as Noble Drew Ali and Marcus Garvey and a few leaders at that time. They were the first to bring up the idea of who are we? Are we just Negroes? So typically when we think of identity, we think of race, we think of nationality, we think of ethnicity. No, I thought the same thing. And those three particular categories were categories that were handed to us. So my question had to be was, how did Black people identify themselves before? Because most of what we know about ourselves as individuals, most of what we know about our families, most of what we know about our group, our history is from slavery to now. So, so I went on a journey of self-discovery for myself personally, like, who am I, Glenn? But I also went on a journey of who am I in terms of my collective self as a Black man, And that journey started for me August 2000. I was in Charlotte, home, watching a movie, and I saw this independent film come on called Slam, and it was about a poet, and that movie just blew me away. And in an attempt to try to be like that guy, I got on this journey of reading books about Black history, and I ended up going to Central and majored in history. So I felt my identity was tied into our history. So I said, let me study Black history. And then I realized that our historical identity is only one fraction, one part I am. After I graduated, started going through human experience, fatherhood. Well, I went into college as a father, but the more it got real life got real, then life experiences started happening. So I had to get on a journey of who I am spiritually. So that's a part of my identity as well. So that's one thing I want to mention. So the question always is, what is core identity and why is it important? It's important because knowing who you are is the foundation of everything. Everything. When somebody says, how do I gain self-love? How can you love something that which you don't know? How can you love something when you don't even know what its purpose or value is? Knowledge of oneself, or knowledge of anything, gives you self-worth and self-value, because you have to know what something is in order to know what its worth or what its value is, what it means, its contribution to anything or whatever it does. So for me, when I started reading books by Marcus Garvey, I read a book called A Message to the Black Man in America by Elijah Muhammad, and started reading other books called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, and books like that. It started taking me down this journey. Who am I? And what value do I bring to my family, to myself? And so that journey led me studying African history, studying African culture. And I realized then that the naming ceremony, when in most West African cultures, when a baby is born, the naming ceremony, typically 7 days after a girl is born, 9 days after a male is born. And on that day, the whole family, the whole village comes out to find out what this baby's name is. And that baby's name is tied to their purpose. So those villages and their tradition had this way of finding out, why did God bring this child to our family? Why did God bring this child to our village? And it may say this child is here to be a healer or a midwife or a warrior or a farmer or a blacksmith or a herbalist or whatever, or a market woman or a market man who sells and have business. But when they find out what this kid's purpose is, that name is reflection of that purpose. Like, you know, 𝗬𝗏𝗵, you know, the king is respected, has come back, or 𝗤𝗏𝗡𝗡𝗘, father has come back. So these names will always remind that kid who that person is. So when that kid is walking down the street and somebody says, hey, 𝗬𝗏𝗵, you know, that kid is reminded, I'm supposed to be a king. I gotta walk like a king, because Oba means king. So that's how names are tied to identity. And if you notice, in when we study history, the first thing slave owners did was to name us. Naming the slaves was very important, because the slave owner needed to identify as a slave, because their purpose was to be slaves. Identity is tied to purpose. So if you don't know what your name means, you know, in a traditional context, then you don't know what your purpose is. Not knowing your purpose is means you don't even know what value you bring to the world. And not knowing what value you bring to the world can lead to not loving oneself. So then you may have people say, I do love, you may love an illusion of yourself. You may love who you think you are and not who you really are, or who you're destined to be, or who God created you to be. So that going on a discovery to find out who I am led me to my many names. So I went from Glenn Fisher to, I remember when I started studying with these brothers, when I first got to college, I got exposed to a whole bunch of stuff. And that's one thing about what I love about college. You meet so many different people. And going to an HBCU, one thing I loved about that is that I didn't realize how diverse Black people were until I went to an HBCU. I thought all Blacks were the same. Now, I went to college and I met Black Republicans, Black Democrats, Black Christians, Black Muslims, Black atheists, you know, Black heterosexuals, Black homosexuals, Black lesbians, Black trans. I mean, we are so different. And one thing I noticed about us, because we've lost knowledge about our and tribal origin, many of us identify with identities become our religious beliefs. So if I typically would say, who are you or what are you? Our answer would be, I'm a child of God, or I'm a child of Christ, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Hebrew Israelite, or we identify with our religion, or we are identified with our job, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm a doctor, you know. So I realized, wow, you know, a lot of Black people identify with occupation and sexual orientation or religion. And that is tied to us losing our core identity of our tribal self. So for me, I said, I need to find out who I am in every aspect. And I broke down myself in 5 identities. Identity number 1 is my spiritual identity. Who am I in terms of who did God create? You know, God created me, and that's a truth that I accept that many people do. So I had to say, what does that mean when I know that God created me? And I accept the idea that God created me with purpose, a destiny. And then to the 𝗖𝗎 tradition, a West African spirituality based on the Yoruba people. And one of the core as characteristics of that particular spiritual belief is finding out one's purpose. So I found out my purpose in life was to help people find their purpose. So I'm like, that's dope. You know what I'm saying? To help people get from where they are to finding out why God created them, so they can be in alignment with God's plan for their life. That's my purpose. So I love my purpose. So that's my spiritual identity. And my name, my traditional name, is called 𝗖𝗎𝗓. It's my Yoruba spiritual name, which means 𝗖𝗎 is respected. So anytime some people in my spiritual community refer to me that name, 𝗖𝗎𝗓, it reminds me of my purpose. It reminds me of why God created me. So anytime I hear that name, 𝗖𝗎𝗓, it reminds me of my responsibility to help people find their purpose. So knowing my purpose, in terms of knowing my purpose, is tied to my identity. I am an 𝗖𝗎 priest. my name is 𝗬𝗎𝗂. I am destined to help people find their purpose. Second level of identity for me is called family identity. Who are you in terms of your family, your ancestry? Who are your people? Who do you come from? Your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your aunts and uncles, your great-great family. I can name every relative in my family going back to year 1800. One traditional African custom we do is we pour libations, where we wake up in the morning and we take a glass of water and we pour water into the earth and we recite the names of our ancestors. Some African tribes say if you can't name your deceased relatives back 10 generations, you don't know who you are. Because it's believed that every part of, a little piece of every one of your ancestors are a part of who you are. If you think about how old people used to be, you know, in our community where you could be wanting to date somebody, but like, I don't know, I don't like his people. His uncle went right back in the day. You know, because people tied that to identity. They would literally judge the character of a young person based on what their uncles and grandmamas and granddaddies did, because it's that old belief that are part of that. And, you know, a lot of us talk about, I ain't gonna say family curses, but, you know, we got family trauma. And sometimes that trauma is passed down, or characteristics or behaviors. So that's why it's also important to know your family identity. Like for me, I was the one who traced my family ancestry, and I reunited family who haven't talked to each other in over 30 years. And we had our first family reunion back in 2005, you know, as a result of finding out how people are connected, and they didn't even know. So, you know, that's my family identity, my ancestors. I know who my people are. I know that my people come from Florence, South Carolina on both sides, and they migrated to North Carolina in the right after slavery to the Robeson County area. So I know my family lineage. So that's a part of yourself too. And that's very important, because when you become a parent, like myself, I'm a father of 5. My kids ask me those questions. Who are we? Where do our people come from in America? And where do they come from in terms of Africa? Now I'm thankful and blessed to have answers for those questions, which leads me to my third identity, tribal identity. This is where most African Americans are in the dark, because we lost knowledge of ourselves from slavery. The slave owners took that from us. They made it taboo or made it lethal to even know. They forced the first generation of slaves to not teach children that were on plantations. Africa came from. So they went from the name 𝗈𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗎, which is a king's name, or 𝗈𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗎, woman's name, to being named Susan, Mary, John, and Jacob, you know, to serve the purpose of being a slave. That name is tied to purpose. So that's why, if you look at the Nation of Islam with Malcolm X, that's why they went hard on changing their name and removing the slave name, because it said, we don't live the purpose anymore. So it's not necessary for me to hold on to that name. So my name is going to be X, which means unknown, until I cover the name that God has for me, you know. So for my tribal identity, I took a DNA test in 2012 to find who I am. I said the science is available. I did it through a Black company who started the industry, AfricanAncestry.com, Black owned by Gina Page and Dr. Rick Kittles, the geneticist. And found out that my maternal DNA is 99.4% of the 𝗃𝗏𝗃 people of Cameroon. So immediately I did all research I could on 𝗃𝗏𝗃 people in Cameroon, and I wasted no time. That following May, I got on a plane, and for the first time that I left country, I went back home to the villages of my ancestors. I got 47 videos on YouTube of my trip to Cameroon. I was the first African-American descendant of the 𝗃𝗏𝗃 people to return home. And I realized a lot of lies we've been told was dispelled when I went. First lie, they don't accept us. That's a lie. I can't speak for other tribes, but my tribe not only accept me, they threw me an entire celebration, a whole village. And I got a video up. The whole village came out, the ancestor mass dancers, women, children, singing, drumming, all for me. And it became so overwhelming, I just started crying, because that was the very first time I felt at home. Literally, I couldn't believe I'm in the middle of the rainforest in a village, and I'm looking at 300 people just singing and chanting and dancing. I don't really understand what they're saying. All I know is that they were doing it for me, because I was the first man to return back from the villages since slavery. Then I go to the original village, and the king gives me a naming ceremony and names me 𝗾𝙤𝗧 II. He named me after his great-grandfather, who was king for 50 years, from 1831 to 1881. And he said that any king that comes after him who adopted Kunji name is going to be named Kunji III after me. So that brings me to my third name. I'm Kunji II. I get inbox every other day from somebody in Cameroon greeting me as Your Majesty. And it was kind of rough at first because I'm like, why are they calling me that? And my tribal brother said, because you have a king's name. They said, regular people in the tribe don't have that name. Only kings or chiefs have that name. And I'm like, whoa. I said, I knew he named me after one, but they treat me like that. Literally, it's not even a cliche. They literally greet me as Your Majesty. And so that's my tribal identity. I'm 𝗬𝗂. So when people say, who are you, your people? My people come from the 𝗬𝗂 people of West Cameroon. So my fourth identity, that's ethnic identity. That's a collective ancestral origin. Black people in America. We're not Negroes. We're not colored. We've adopted it Afro-American, even African-American. African-American is a recognition of our ethnic origin, African, and our nationality, our citizenship, American, African-American. But our collective identity is African, because that's the continent our people come from. That's the continent where Europeans kidnapped our ancestors and brought us over here. So when somebody say, what are you? I say, ethnically speaking, I'm African. Now, I know that's a continent with 54 countries and over 3,000 tribes or ethnic groups, but my continental identity is African. Now, the last identity is the personal identity. That's who you are based on your personality, how you show up in the world, your experience in life. Me, I got Radius, Glenn, who played football at 𝗬𝗎 High, state track champion, indoor, outdoor champion. Glenn, who went to Livingstone College, Central. Fight the Power Glenn at Central. Going to 𝐼𝗹𝗹𝗶 parties and Winston parties every Thursday at Livingstone. That's my personal identity, how people know me from my experience. That's a part of who I am as well. So for me, those 5 identities is like a 5 different part of who I am. So I'm never confused, which means that whenever I get engaged in anything, a career path, relationships, I have to cross-reference those things and those peoples with those identities and the purpose that come with that. How did this purpose or this event or this thing or this journey I'm embarking on, the purpose that God gave me, my spiritual identity? If it's not in alignment, I can't engage with that person or that thing. This thing or this purpose compromise my family identity. Because I'm an ancestors. I got to walk with good character. I got to show up in the world to represent my family and my people well. Just doing this thing or these people compromise that. My tribal, I'm a representative in America of my tribe in Africa. So if I'm the first 𝗬𝗂 person they meet, I got to be mindful of that. I may be the first 𝗬𝗂 person they meet, and I got to show up well with that. So having your identity can need a lot of unnecessary experiences, and also it can give you emotional clarity about yourself, because most people, again, a lot of people go into depression because they don't even know their own self-worth and their own self-value, because they don't even know who they are, But I'm gonna stop there because I know I could talk all day about this, so I'm gonna end it right there.
Wow. That's all I can say is wow. That is powerful. Is anybody else interested in following this journey with him? Because I sure am. I would love to begin to embark on that journey of self-discovery, because like you said, it's so interesting how we identify in so many different ways that honestly are false.
We identify with characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's powerful. Well, we're going to take a few minutes to answer any questions. So if anybody has any questions, any comments, I'm speechless. But if you guys have anything that you would like to ask or to comment on regarding what he just shared, please feel free to do so now.
I can comment off of, for me, my college experience, like how you said it helped in your personal development. I must say, breaking away from home, knowing that family has a major influence and society has a major influence on our values and our beliefs. Breaking away from home, I went to school, I went to ECU, so it was 4 hours away from home. I knew I didn't want to be too close to home because I already knew my mama would pull up. She ain't gonna pull up no 4 hours away. So going to ECU, it was very helpful to me. My experience was great. I really discovered a lot about myself. What are my strengths, my weaknesses? I would engage in, I took a professional development class, and we had to do like a strengths finders test to discover what our strengths were. And I found out that I'm a learner, I'm a achiever. And just for me personally, college really helped in discovering who I was and just developing as a human being, and also forming my own beliefs and values aside from what I was taught growing up. Because there's some people, they have certain values and beliefs and behaviors, and when you ask them, why do you believe in that? Oh, because that's how I was raised. But you don't really think for yourself. You're just saying that because that's what you were taught growing up. But I've been able to form my own values and my own beliefs aside from what I was taught growing up. So maybe for people who maybe didn't get the college experience, like what would be your advice on maybe how they can navigate? Because I feel like college does a great job at helping you guide your way through life. But what about the people that maybe haven't had that experience?
Well, that's a great question. Like you, again, college was the environment I needed personally. Going back to the identity one, spiritual identity, everybody's journey is different, right? When you look at Malcolm X, he didn't go to college. He discovered himself in prison, you know, so he was in a very extreme environment that put him in a place where he had a choice to just waste time, as many prisoners were doing, or take that time to say, how can I better use this time to heal myself, to gain knowledge, and to figure out why did I engage in the stuff that I did that got in the first place. So it was prison. So for a person who's not going to college, that doesn't mean you're exempt from that self-discovery, because to be honest with you, you're technically already on the journey. I tell people, when I started to say, when people say, when did all this begin, when you got into this? I say, well, I used to have a date. I used to say back in 2000, 2001. But now I say when I was born. I just became aware of the journey around 2001. So for me, I read a lot of books. So a lot of reading helped me, education. But education is not restricted to institutional. If you can read, if you're literate, go buy a book. And now, you know, you got YouTube, so there's a lot of stuff out there. So if you're trying to get more research on history or collective stuff, there's so many resources. But I strongly recommend people start with the spiritual and the personal. One thing for me, I started with the history stuff first, but I realized I still had a lot of internal healing from trauma that I experienced as a kid. You know what I'm saying? That impacted my human behavior as an adult, how I showed up as a father, how I showed up as a man in the world, and things like that. And I realized that, wow, I'm very knowledgeable about Black history and Black culture and all this, but I need help through life experiences that's getting me into the present. And part of me having to be honest with myself. So that's another thing too. Going into that journey of spiritual and personal is a little more difficult, because it ain't just based on reading books. It's being honest with yourself. Kind of tied to the previous brother who spoke on mental illness. A lot of people are not willing to be honest with themselves, but that's very important to identity, you know, because you can go hard all day on the Black identity or the African identity or that collective identity, but understanding yourself, that may not be as easy, but it'd be well worth it. So I would tell people, start with your religious belief. If you are a Christian, start in the Bible and start with prayer. Open up to God. God, help me to understand, who am I in terms of who you created? Because that's very important. What am I here to do? Because sometimes we confuse with job occupation as purpose. Everyone's life purpose is not directly related to their occupation. For some people it is. And if it is, you got the golden ticket to the Willie Chocolate Factory. If your purpose is to heal people and you happen to be a doctor, but you can be a janitor at an elementary school, and it's your purpose to mentor people. So you are placed in a position that you may have to mentor kids. So I would definitely say, start asking yourself the question itself. Who am I? Begin there. That's always. And always remember, that answer is not going to come overnight. I'm still on this journey. It's not really a destination. That's literally going to be a journey you add on as you continue to grow, as you continue to experience, as you continue to understand yourself. Now, like I said, I have those basic components, but how I express those components change every year. It change how as I continue to grow in life. You know what I'm saying? So definitely ask yourself that question. Create an identity journal. Go get a journal for yourself and start journaling and break those 5 parts down. My spiritual identity, my tribal identity, ethnic identity, and personal identity. And start with them and start going down what you know as of today in reference to all those parts of you. Who am I spiritually? Who am I in terms of my personal family and my ancestors? Can I even name anybody dead in my family beyond my grandma? People don't even know, can't go back more than 2 generations. Do genealogy. Sign up on Ancestry.com. That's another company. I use that. And through them, I was able to get every single name of every deceased relative in my family back to year 1800. I even got the last will and testament of the slave owner that owned 5 of my ancestors and willed them off to his children. I literally have the will saved on my desktop. So that's a part of my story. That's a part of my family. You know, and I look at that stuff and look at behaviors in my family like addictions and stuff. And so that better help me to understand my family. So I say start journaling and start talking to your family and your people. And like the previous brother said, if you are a person that don't mind talking to somebody like a counselor, an elder you can trust, somebody that's old that can help you navigate through some of these questions as well.
Wow, that's good stuff. And I just wanted to comment on what you had said about Malcolm X and how he used his time wisely. And I think that we are in such an opportune time right now, you know, during this pandemic. Let's be honest, a lot of us have more time than we had before because we can't go to the places and destinations and things that we did before. So now would definitely be an opportune time to begin to search and to read and things like that. So that was really good. Any other questions or comments?
I have one more question. When you talked about like healing, whether it be like childhood trauma or like relationship trauma, do you believe that healing is an ongoing, like lifelong type of process, or you can come to a place where you're like completely healed from something?
It depends on the trauma. You know, traumas aren't the same, and our traumas don't affect people the same. You know, for me, you can. Trauma is an event, something that happens to someone. It's an experience, right? The issue is how we've been responding to the trauma since the trauma itself. You know, so like for me, for an example, just being transparent, I was sexually abused, I would say, when I was 4 and 5 years old. You know, I was stuff with my baby, and I was actually sexually assaulted by a teenager when I was 5. You know, and it took me to the age of 29 to finally tell somebody. So I was my mom. We was watching a movie, and it was about that said thing, and that happened to me. Like, what, for real? And so I was at a place where I could finally talk about it, but I had never connected it. Well, now I had never connected to how that impact how I show up in my relationships with women, myself, and so forth. So for me, some traumas I'm still healing from. But then there are some traumas I was able to reconcile and able to move on and not allow it to impact how I move into my destiny. So I guess you can call it heal. I don't think that's something somebody else can say. I think that's something, a conclusion you and God would come to within yourself, you know. Because some people can get to a point where it's manageable, where I'm still in the healing process, but I'm at a point where I'm aware of this effect on my behavior. And so I'm able to manage that part a little better. Than I'm not drinking anymore, or I'm not very promiscuous anymore, or I'm not engaging in drugs anymore, or I don't have my depressive behaviors has decreased. You know, so now some people get to more manageable ways, you know. So, but for some people it is ongoing for a long time. But I think you can get to a point, I guess you could call it being healed. But I think it depends on the circumstance. And I think, again, that's a personal conversation one has with themselves and God.
Any other questions or comments on core identity and anything related to what's been shared this far? All right. Well, if not, we are going to move along. This has been such a powerful discussion. And now we're going to move on to our open discussion on self-love. And I would like to introduce our special guests, Jewel Wright, Charlotte Jenkins, and Jasmine Watkins. You guys can unmute yourselves and say hello.
Hey,
Hi.
so I guess we can kind of get started on basically just like establishing what is self-love. So it's basically having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness. It means taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing your well-being to please others. Self-loves mean not settling less for anything than you deserve. And then some people may mistakenly believe that self-love is the same as like narcissism or having a big ego, but it just simply means having respect for yourself and accepting your weaknesses and flaws and just treating yourself kindly. I also asked myself, why is self-love important? Well, it's key for mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being, and also keeping depression and anxiety at bay.
Good stuff. So tell us, Jewel, what does self-love look like to you? How do you demonstrate self-love?
So I did break it down. There are 5 self-love languages. And the first one is quality time. So basically scheduling some uninterrupted alone time to nurture your being, whether that be meditation, engaging in a creative passion, taking yourself on a date, reading a book, or sleeping. Physical touch is the second one. So honoring your body by doing things that make it feel good. So yoga, exercise, dancing, taking a warm bath, or skincare. Words of affirmation was the third one. So positive self-talk, gratitude towards yourself, and empowering affirmation. So like journaling, like we mentioned earlier, or making a list of our strengths. Acts of service is the fourth one, and that's doing tasks that need to be completed or things that have been neglected which serve your well-being. So cleaning your home, or making your bed, or attending therapy. And then the last one was receiving gifts. So that means like treating yourself or creating gifts that spark your joy. So maybe going on a trip or going shopping. I know for me, I can relate to all of these. Like I have a bit of all of these, but my number one, like primary one, is quality time. Like I definitely value my uninterrupted alone time where, you know, I have my days where I don't really want to be bothered, and it's not necessarily anything personal to anyone. I just need that time to recoup, to recover, to process, to self-reflect. That way I can, you know, feel like I've been replenished, and then I can go out and navigate and get out there into the world.
Absolutely. I got nothing but snaps for you because you just hit it right on the nail. And, you know, I think that it's so important. I love that you share on how it's not personal, because I know that I've experienced that when I am good for putting my phone on Do Not Disturb and taking the day, like literally. And my family, they know it now. But when I first started doing it, they're like, what's wrong with her? Like, why you not answering our calls and stuff like that? Look, today, I need this day to myself. So like you said, so that I can just allow myself to be refueled and refilled, because we give so much and we don't even realize it. You know,
Right.
We give at our jobs, ministry, you know, if we have, you know, family, siblings, whatever, even, you know, with our parents and other relationships, friendships, we give so much and we don't even realize it. And it's so important that you take that time to literally, just like you spend time with other people, spend time with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. You know, and then going back to what Tabari said, shared earlier, what I learned with my journey is to vocalize that, because like I said, initially, I'm just doing it, but I'm not telling anybody why. I'm not explaining to them, expressing to them, you know, why. They're just like, oh, she just not talking to us, you know, or she's just not answering our phone calls or whatever. But as I begin to learn more of how to express myself, you know, especially to parents, because I don't know if you guys experience this, but my mom would be like, look, I'm your mother and I can call you whenever I want. You better answer this phone when, you know, and I had to learn how to, you know, express to her, like, Mom, is nothing, you know, against you or nothing like that, but I just need this time to myself and this is why. And, you know, as I began to express that more, it was more of an understanding, you know, so just making sure that we use our voices to express to people what we're experiencing so that they can understand and respect it. So
I totally agree. Just like letting people know, and also asking other people, what are your love languages? What are some of your likes and dislikes, so that I'm aware, so I can know how to deal with your type of personality and so forth. I know some of my dear loved ones, once they like vocalize that to me, I can understand and not take things personally.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think, I can't remember who shared it previously, but when we were talking about, loving other people, I think it might have been Glenn, when he was talking about, in our relationships, and, when we're in relationships, that how can you best love other people if you don't even practice that within yourself? And one of the things that I actually shared with Christina when I was meditating about this was the fact of, the greatest commandment that Jesus gave us as, Christians, was to love God and then to love your neighbor as yourself. And when I thought about that, I'm like, that is so powerful, because it's like, in order for you to love your neighbor as yourself, first of all, you better be loving yourself well before you try to love somebody else, because otherwise, how can you do that? Like, think about that. If I'm not loving myself properly, think about the funky love that I'm gonna give other people. Like, let's just be real. Like, I'm not gonna be able to love my son, my fiance, my family, nobody else. And it's so crazy how we can go through, and I've seen this, we can go through our lives and we be thinking that we're doing the right thing. We think that we loving people. We think that we're out here serving in ministry. We think that we're doing the thing. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not, because you're not even loving yourself well. And that trickles out, and that can be felt, and and it's expressed whether you think it or not. That can be felt by other people, and it's like that, yourself first. You got to love yourself first. You have to care for yourself first. And like Tavares was saying earlier, I believe, again, that is where that anxiety and that depression and just all the other crazy stuff that we can believe in our heads come into play, because you're not valuing yourself, or like Glenn was saying, or you don't even know yourself well enough to be able to love other people. You don't know yourself enough. You don't know your love languages enough to even understand love, or to receive love, or to give love, so it's super important. So begin to understand, along that discovery of yourself, understanding your love language as well, because you can have people coming into your life who genuinely are trying to express love to you, and you rejecting it because it's different, or what I'm saying, like, or because, again, you haven't really understood love for yourself. Yeah, it's a lot. But it's so necessary.
I would like to add something to that. I love everything that you said. It was on point, and I'm glad you brought the 5 love languages. I don't know if I would recommend everybody take that test. They have it online now. I own the book 5 Love Languages. And, I went and took this, and I was sitting here. It's been a while since I looked at it. I'm actually researching right now, but I do remember reading and like, oh my God, that's true. Like, it's almost like you needed to be I wasn't conscious of it. Sometimes we're subconscious of ourselves, but not conscious, like, oh, I am like that. Oh yeah, wow, I am like that. And then when I have people do it around me, it helped me better understand them better. And I'm gonna tell you, as a father, getting the love languages on your children. And imagine if you knew the love language of your parent. And we are taking our parents personally, like, oh man, they don't love me or treat me bad. And reality, they're just, like you said, they're just expressing love in the way that feels natural to them. And it just, unfortunately, is not the way you like to receive it. Because you got the way people like to give, then you got others the way they like to receive it. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that 5 love language is deep. So yeah, I co-sign that.
Definitely, like you said, that definitely was one way that I better learn how to, first off, love myself, and then my son as well. And then in my relationship, I'm currently engaged, but in my relationship, because I had a moment where I was just hitting a brick wall. I'm like, I was just at an area where I don't know, it was like there was something missing. And like I said, once I begin to better understand myself, and it's like, okay, it's not that they don't love me, or it's not that, it's them, it's me. Like I'm having a hard time of understanding my own way that I receive and the way that I understand love. So yeah, it will definitely help you to know. That's the biggest thing, like when we're sharing on that core identity, knowing yourself is everything.
You have something to say, Charlotte?
Yeah, I do. I'm just taking in everything you guys are saying. This is such a good discussion and environment to be in. My notes that I had on self-love is exactly hitting home what you guys are saying. I'm a really big advocate on the 5 love languages, because it's like if a person who's speaking French is trying to speak to a person who's speaking English, there's just a disconnect, and then there's frustration. And, a lot of good fruits can't come out of that if you're not understanding what language that person is trying to speak. But I mean, the number one thing I had written down is that you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to make sure that you're full so you can pour into others' lives. I think we're really focused on being like relational and giving yourself and all that you can do. And I found myself in college. I went to ECU with Jewel, and we are pulled in so many different directions. Even if you're not in school, if you're just working or whatever you might be into, you pull yourself in so many directions, and you forget that maybe the outcome of your work isn't at the level you want it to be because you haven't taken that time for yourself. And we're so focused on pouring into others that we don't pour into ourselves. And I just think, sometimes we have to recenter and put ourselves first, because it's just so important. And then another point I had written down that I've lived by is comparison is the thief of joy. I had to learn that. And I think in this day and age, we see, social media, whoever we're around, it's just hard that we're always comparing ourselves. And that is the thief of joy. And you can't, sit and just constantly compare yourself. You have to give yourself that self-love, and like how we've been saying, journaling, podcasts, speaking to a friend or a therapist, just kind of even just speaking to yourself what you're good at and how you're proud of yourself and what your love language is. I think that's so important, because comparison is a really hard thing to not fall into nowadays. So I think, like how Jewel was saying, taking time to yourself. Sometimes I'll just have my phone on D&D, or I just won't be on Twitter or Instagram. Sometimes I'll take a step back so I don't fall into that trap, because it's very hard with today's day and age, not comparing yourself. I think that's a big deal.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think that, to comment on what you shared, Charlotte, that goes back to a lot of people not knowing themselves, because once you begin to know yourself and your worth and your value, you're not going to look to the left and the right and see what somebody else, because you know what you bring to the table, your worth, your value, so that's what I think the issue really is about the comparison, is because people they don't really understand and know themselves and their own worth. So
yeah.
I did have a question, because I wanted to get you all's advice. One of the key definitions in self-love is not sacrificing your well-being to please others. And I know in the past I've struggled with like trying to please others, because I'm thinking, oh, I care about this relationship, I want to ensure that they're happy. But when I felt like I was pouring too much, I became empty and I started to become unhappy. And I had struggled with setting boundaries with people, and even people that are near and dear to me, like my family. So how have you learned to say no at times, especially when it's someone that you love dearly? And how have you learned to just kind of like enforce your boundaries with people?
I think that you just answered your question, setting boundaries. You have to establish those boundaries in those certain things where you're like, I'm not going to budge on this. And it's not, again, not because, I'm mad at you, or not because I don't value you or nothing like that, but I value myself. And so anything that you feel like is non-negotiables, saying no to that and meaning it and standing on it, and again, going back to when it comes to family, because that's a very delicate situation. I feel like being honest with them and expressing exactly what it is that you are thinking, you are feeling, you are experiencing. That's something that you know, I think that we need to do more of within our families, which is why I get on my soapbox about with parenting with power, because it's like with your family, those are the people that's closest to you. So those are the people that you should be the most honest with. You got the world to lie to you. You got the world to be dishonest. That shouldn't be amongst the people closest to you. So being honest about what it is that you are experiencing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you want. You have a right. One thing that I always say is a quote I always say, tell people, you shouldn't have to tell people what you need. Or you shouldn't have to, I'm sorry, you shouldn't have to ask people for what you need. You tell them what you need. You ask for what you want.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's good. And just to add to that, I think especially as young people too, I think it's a lot of trial and error. I know right now, you know, me and Jewel, we were just talking the other day, it's hard to figure out what your boundaries are. But I think finding those boundaries is kind of just a trial and error. Like when something is done that makes you uncomfortable, or when you notice that, hey, I'm turning into this negative, toxic person, and you kind of have to backtrack and see, okay, well, where did I allow myself and this other person to cross the line, and kind of just trial and error. Because off bat, I think it's hard to know what exactly your boundaries are, because you have to know what they are before you set them. And I think as young people, it is hard to kind of just set it off gate. So I think that comes from just experiences with relationships and friendships, just figuring out what your triggers are, because everybody's are different. Everybody's boundaries are different.
I would even say to that, we know within us, we know when something makes us uncomfortable. We know when something doesn't feel right, you know. And so I think that those that I'll say intuition, or the Holy Spirit within us will be telling us and urging us, you know, that, oh no, that don't feel right, or no, that's not for you, or mm-mm. And so when you feel that on the inside, I think that that's when you know, okay, a boundary needs to be established there. One last thing on self-love that I did want to speak on was the fact that I like how Jewel definitely defined it to a T. But, you know, I think that a lot of us, and that goes with our love languages as well, can understand love differently. There's so many different definitions of love, right? Like the world has so many. You ask 10 people what love is, and you're going to get 10 different answers. But one of the things that I really wanted to come to, because I'm all about, you know, truth. So I always go to the Word of God, because I believe that that is absolute truth. And the two things that, or the first two things that love is defined as in 1 Corinthians 13 is love is patient and love is kind. And so I think that that's just something that we need to always keep in mind when we think about love and self-love, is being patient with ourselves and being kind towards ourselves. Because then once you have that within yourself, then you can be patient with other people. You will be kind towards other people. That's the kind of love that you will then, you know, show other people. But most importantly with ourselves, because we're talking about self-love. One thing that I had shared with Christina, I've seen it, I've experienced it for myself. As young people, this generation is some of the most impatient people on this planet, right? Because of the, you know, technology and just the, like everything is at our fingertips today. You know what I'm saying? Like anything you want, you can have it quickly, you know, and it's like that can create us and mold us to be so impatient to wait for things. And I like how it was shared previously about everything in life has a process. Think about that. Everything that God created, everything in this life has a process. Start with a seed and it grows and blooms. Literally, think about us. We start as infants, we grow as children, etc. Everything in life has a process. So remembering that. And the fact of the matter is that God is patient with us. So who are we to be impatient with ourselves? Like he is very patient. Think about your own personal life. Take a moment and think about your own personal life. And I guarantee you have some moments that you can remember and say, God was so patient with me during that time. Or God is patient with me today. God is always patient with us. So we need to be patient with ourselves as we are growing, as we're developing, as we're, you know, going along our process and our life journey. you don't have to be in a rush. I know that's something that I definitely struggle with when in my younger years, like 𝗬𝗂 was saying, going to college and thinking like, all right, after I graduate from college, boom, I'm going to get this, you know, major job, and I'm going to be a millionaire by 25, and I'm going to be married and all this by, we put these timelines and dates and frames on things. And it's like, why are you so much in a rush when God is patient with you? Think about that. If you experience everything that you so desire by 25, what you gonna do with the other 75 years that you have on this planet? Think about that. Are you even capable to handle all the things that you so want today? You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, be patient. That's what love is. That's what self-love, being patient with yourself. Think about the times when you make mistakes and you fail. Are you patient with yourself? You're still growing. You're young. You're still learning. Be patient. It's okay. Guess what? You're not the only one to make a mistake. You're not the only one to have some type of failure. Don't beat yourself up. Be patient with yourself. And that goes into the next part of love, being kind. What are you saying to yourself? What are you saying about yourself? How do you speak of yourself? I hear so many young people saying such negative things about themselves that it just so disturbs me. The way that they talk about themselves, the things they call themselves. Like, I'm gonna be real, because I'm always real when I speak. Savage, ratchet, you know, whatever Meg Thee Stallion saying. I'm like, why do you want to say that about yourself? I mean, really, that's, what is that? Why would you talk about yourself in such a way? What are you saying about yourself? Are you speaking kind to yourself? You know, one thing that Jewel had said about the affirmations of words, I do this a lot. And I had to, because like I told you guys, I grew up in an environment that was very, it was traumatic, you know, a lot of physical abuse, verbal abuse, things like that. And so there was so many negative things that I was called, that was said about me. And as a child and a teenager, that rehearsing, as an adult, that was what I thought about myself. So I had to begin to change the narrative. Like I said, what we can do as adults, as young adults, you can change that narrative. And so I began to speak positive things of myself. I would begin to say, you know, you are beautiful, you are powerful, you are strong, you can do this. One of my favorite things, I always say, one of my favorite scriptures, I can do all things through Christ. Anytime I hear doubt, or somebody says something, like if I share an idea or something, they're like, oh, I don't see that happening. Or I can do all things, you know. So what are you saying about yourself? Are you speaking truth? Are you speaking kindly to yourself? And again, when you are presenting yourself, are you presenting yourself in a kind way? Or are you saying like, oh, I'm this, I'm a savage, I'm this and that? Like, no. Going back to, I like how what Glenn had shared about your identity. You know, once you begin to understand your value and your worth and more about yourself, none of that stuff, none of those other things that the world says and media and all that kind of stuff, that won't even faze you. You won't get distracted by that. You won't be looking to the left or to the right, like Charlotte has said, comparing yourself, because you know, I have worth, I have value. You know, this is my purpose, and I love me, and that's what it is, and that's where you'll live. And then that will then really help your relationships with other people, because of the way that you, as yourself, love yourself and carry yourself. So that's all I got for y'all. Any other questions or comments? No. All right. Well, it's been such a powerful discussion. Again, I'm super excited for this opportunity and being able to share with you guys, but also to hear, because I took a lot of notes, a lot of things that I will definitely be meditating on. And can you guys share your information of how we can connect with you guys? Because I'm definitely interested in taking this time to, you know, discover more of myself and my identity.
No, I can say I'm super grateful that we all have this opportunity, because especially during a time like this, just being able to talk and just vent to each other and express our thoughts and our, things that we're going through. I think this has really helped, and it's really gave me some that extra push to just stay motivated and sane during this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely being around like-minded people who are just so encouraging, uplifting. It's really spiritually feeding, very emotionally uplifting too, which is important right now. We're left with how we're feeling instead of just going through the motions of day to day, So I'm very grateful. Thank you, Christina, for inviting me to this, and I would like to stay connected.
Yeah. Where's everyone mostly? Does everyone usually on IG or Facebook? What's the best way for everyone to maybe stay connected?
So can you guys drop 𝗬𝗂 and Glenn, can you guys both drop your information in the chats if possible, or you guys can come off mute as well and tell us how we can connect with you guys?
Yes, I will put my information in the chat for my Cloud of Mentalities blog and my social media.
Okay.
Oh, you're on mute.
Let's see. Yeah, I was going to try to see if I could unmute, but I don't think I can do that.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes, good.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to put it in the chat. IG and Facebook. I'm on both. I facilitate a fit club on Facebook, the Ogun Strong Fit Club. So if you are looking for motivation, fitness, health, exercise motivation, join the Ogun Strong Fit Club. We motivate each other, share workout, share experience, trade information, and post our videos. And, we just trying to fellowship and help each other out as we achieve our fitness and health goals. So that's pretty much my main page on Facebook, and my fitness page, Ogun Strong Fit Club. And I put my personal stuff in there as well. Okay. And anybody, I'm gonna leave my Facebook information there. So if you want a book list, anybody come, because I read a lot and I've read a lot, in relation to identity and history and stuff like that. So if you're interested in a book list or some books to read, that's definitely helped me. I'll be willing to share.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you guys again for your time today. Thank you for sharing. This has been such an amazing experience, so empowering, enlightening, and educational as well. So thank you guys again. Really enjoyed the discussion and look forward to connecting with you guys and staying connected with you guys during this time. Look forward to having it again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, IKEA. Thank you so much. Let me tell you, I have thoroughly enjoyed each and every one of you. I mean, we had some phenomenal speakers, even the ones who came in, time in, shared. Let me tell you, I've learned. This was really focused on mind, body, and soul and spirit. And you all really touched that. And that's what this was about, to give our young adults this platform, because we need to hear your voice, and your voice does matter. So that's what this project was for, this event, and I'm thoroughly pleased, and I'm going to do it again. This really, I felt like going to do some yoga. I want to do some spiritual healing. I want to go run this DNA so I can know my core identity.
Yes.
Let me tell you, 𝗬𝗂, I have a therapist, okay, sir, and I use them when I need. So I find all that information very, very important, and that is something that we need to make sure we advocate, because people say, oh, you are strong enough to go through. No, sometimes I just need a relief. And that's what this was about. So I'm thoroughly happy. I know we're going over our time, so I'm going to go ahead and bring Mr. Camry back on. Cam, if you could come on back, and if you want to introduce
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You can press out.
Okay. I don't understand why you keep calling me Cam. You know my name. You've been knowing me for years. My name is 𝗬𝗂.
Kamari,
It's
I know.
Kamari, just like our cousin. Why you calling him Kamari?
But
Listen,
look, y'all, we all grew up in church together. I know. Let me tell you something. Cam is his baby brother.
that's who that is, Cameron.
Right. That's, you got them all mixed up because they all got like C's.
Thank you, Jewel. But that's so funny. Thank you for correcting me, the prophet. Okay.
Thank y'all for this. It was much needed. So yeah, let's go ahead and pray out. Lord, we just thank you for everything, Lord, that was said and done today, God. We just thank you for the clarity that came, for the encouragement that came, and even for those that needed clarity, we thank you for that as well. Thank you for that we will take this information and apply it to our everyday lives, God. And we even get excited for the next one that is to come and the more to come, years and years to come. We just thank you for it now. We honor you for it all, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all.
Amen. Thank y'all.
See you next time.
Peace.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
See you. Bye, y'all.